Imagine this. You've just lost everything. Your city, your people, your freedom. You're kneeling before the man who defeated you, waiting for the sword to fall. But instead of death, he offers you water. Instead of vengeance, he offers you mercy. And in that moment, you realize you're not facing a conqueror. You're facing something far more dangerous. A leader so honorable, you can't help but respect him. This isn't fiction. This happened. And the man who did it changed the course of history forever. His name was Saladin. And this is his story. The year is 1187. Jerusalem, the holiest city in three faiths, has just fallen. For 88 years, Christian crusaders ruled it with an iron fist. Now, a Muslim army stands at its gates. Inside, thousands of Christians wait in terror. They remember what happened when the Crusaders first took Jerusalem. The streets ran red with blood. Men, women, children, no one was spared. History is about to repeat itself, except it doesn't. Because the man leading this army isn't like other conquerors. When Saladin enters Jerusalem, not a single person is killed, not one building is burned. Instead, he orders his soldiers to show mercy. He personally pays ransoms to free those who can't afford their freedom. He even allows Christian pilgrims to continue visiting their holy sites. His enemies are shocked. His own commanders are confused. But Saladin has a different vision of leadership, one that will make him a legend in both the Islamic world and Christian Europe, one that will make kings and knights speak his name with reverence centuries after his death. But how did a Kurdish boy from a modest family become the most respected leader of the medieval world? How did he unite a fractured empire, defeat the greatest military force of his time, and still earn the admiration of his enemies? That's what we're about to discover. Because Saladin's story isn't just about conquest, it's about character. It's about what happens when a leader chooses honor over hatred, mercy over massacre, and principle over power. This is the legacy of Saladin, the man who proved that true strength isn't about how many battles you win, it's about how you win them. Saladin was born in 1137 in the city of Tikrit, in what is now Iraq. His full name was Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, which means the righteousness of the faith, Joseph, son of Job. His family were Kurds, a people without their own kingdom, serving as soldiers and administrators in a fractured Muslim world. This is important, because Saladin wasn't born into royalty. He wasn't destined for greatness. He was the son of a provincial governor, growing up in a world torn apart by internal conflict and external invasion. The Muslim world in the 12th century was nothing like it had been during its golden age. The great Abbasid Caliphate had fractured into competing kingdoms. The Seljuk Turks controlled the east. The Fatimids controlled Egypt. Local emirs fought each other for scraps of territory. And into this chaos came the Crusaders, European Christians who saw opportunity in division. Young Saladin watched all of this. He saw how weakness invited invasion, how disunity meant defeat, and he learned something that would define his entire life. That leadership isn't just about personal ambition, it's about service to something greater than yourself. His father and uncle were military commanders, and Saladin grew up in their camps, learning the art of war. But he also learned something more important. He studied Islamic law, philosophy, and theology. He memorized the Quran. He learned that a true leader doesn't just command armies, he commands respect. When Saladin was in his 20s, his uncle Shirkuh was sent to Egypt by the ruler of Damascus to intervene in a power struggle. Saladin went with him. It was supposed to be a routine military campaign. Instead, it became the turning point of his life. Egypt was the prize everyone wanted. Whoever controlled Egypt controlled trade routes, vast wealth, and strategic position. The Fatimid dynasty that ruled it was collapsing. Everyone saw the opportunity. The question was who would seize it. In 1169, Shirkuh became the vizier of Egypt, the power behind the throne. But just months later, he died suddenly, and the young Saladin, barely 30 years old, was chosen to replace him. No one expected much from him. He seemed too young, too inexperienced. The Fatimid caliph thought he could control him. The commanders thought he would be a figurehead. they were all wrong. Within 2 years, Saladin abolished the Fatimid Caliphate and brought Egypt back into the fold of Sunni Islam. He restructured the government, rebuilt the military, and turned Egypt from a fractured state into a powerhouse. And he did it all while maintaining careful diplomacy, building alliances, and showing respect to those who deserved it. This was the first sign of what made Saladin different. He understood that power without legitimacy is fragile, that conquest without consolidation is meaningless, and that true leadership means building something that lasts. But Egypt was just the beginning, because Saladin's real test was still ahead, and it would come in the form of the greatest military challenge of the medieval world, the Crusader states. To understand what Saladin faced, you need to understand what the Crusades had created. In 1099, European Christian armies captured Jerusalem after a siege that ended in one of history's worst massacres. Crusader chronicles themselves describe streets flowing with blood up to the ankles. The entire Muslim and Jewish population was slaughtered. On this foundation of violence, the Crusaders built 4 kingdoms: the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Edessa. These weren't just military outposts. They were fortified states, filled with castles that seemed impregnable, defended by the most formidable warriors in Christendom: the Knights Templar, the Knights Hospitaller, heavily armored cavalry that could break through almost any line, castles like Crac des Chevaliers that stood like mountains of stone, and a constant stream of reinforcements from Europe, pilgrims and warriors who believed they were fighting for God Himself. For decades, Muslim leaders tried to push them back. They failed. The Crusader kingdoms grew stronger. They raided Muslim territories, took prisoners, disrupted trade, and the Muslim world remained divided, unable to mount a unified response. This was the world Saladin inherited when he became Sultan of Egypt and Syria in 1174, a world where his people were fragmented, outmatched, and demoralized, a world where the very idea of retaking Jerusalem seemed impossible. But Saladin saw something others didn't. He saw that the Crusaders' greatest strength was Muslim disunity, that if the Muslim world could be united, the balance of power would shift completely. So that's what he set out to do. For more than a decade, Saladin focused not on fighting Crusaders, but on unifying Muslim territories. He brought Damascus under his control, then Aleppo, then Mosul. He negotiated with some rulers, fought with others, always seeking to bring them into a unified command. This wasn't easy. Many Muslim emirs resented him. They saw him as an upstart, a Kurd trying to rule Arab lands. They fought against him, sometimes even allying with Crusaders against him. But Saladin was patient. He understood that unity couldn't be forced through conquest alone. It had to be earned through legitimacy, through demonstrating that he was fighting for Islam, not personal glory. And slowly, methodically, he built the coalition that would change everything. By 1187, Saladin commanded a united Muslim force, larger than any seen since the early days of Islam. And he was ready to face the Crusaders in open battle. The moment came at a place called Hattin, and what happened there would become legendary. July 3rd, 1187, the hills of Hattin, near the Sea of Galilee. The largest Crusader army ever assembled is marching across scorching terrain. 20,000 men, knights in heavy armor, foot soldiers, the cream of Christian military might in the east. They're walking into a trap. Saladin has been planning this for months. He knew the Crusaders would have to respond when he besieged the city of Tiberias. He knew they would march through waterless terrain in the height of summer. He knew they would be exhausted, thirsty, and vulnerable by the time they reached Hattin. And he was right. As the Crusader army climbs the hills of Hattin, Saladin's forces surround them. 40,000 cavalry and infantry, fresh and ready. But Saladin doesn't attack immediately. Instead, he orders his men to set fire to the dry grass. Smoke and flames sweep across the battlefield, adding to the Crusaders' misery. The battle that follows is devastating. The Crusader infantry breaks first, overwhelmed by heat, thirst, and constant arrow fire. The knights make desperate charges, but they're isolated, surrounded, and cut down. By the end of the day, the Crusader army is annihilated. Captured among the prisoners are the most powerful leaders of the Crusader states: King Guy of Jerusalem, Reynald of Châtillon, the most hated man in the Muslim world, known for his cruelty and broken treaties, the Grand Masters of the Templars and Hospitallers, and hundreds of knights and nobles. What Saladin does next defines his character. He orders King Guy and the other nobles to be brought to his tent. They're terrified. They expect torture, execution, the kind of treatment they've given to Muslim prisoners. Instead, Saladin offers them water and treats them with courtesy. He makes it clear they'll be ransomed, not killed. But there's one exception: Reynald of Châtillon. Reynald had repeatedly broken truces, attacked Muslim pilgrims, and even threatened to attack Mecca itself. Saladin had sworn an oath that if he ever captured Reynald, he would execute him personally. And now that moment has come. Saladin offers Reynald a choice: convert to Islam and live. Reynald refuses with insults, so Saladin draws his sword and strikes him down himself. It's the only execution he personally carries out in his entire life. And even in this, there's a principle. Reynald wasn't killed for being Christian. He was killed for being an oath-breaker, a threat to peace, and a violator of sacred truces. To everyone else, Saladin shows mercy. This shocks the captured crusaders. It shocks the Muslim commanders who expect mass executions. But Saladin understands something they don't: that how you treat your enemies in victory defines you more than how you fight them in battle. With the Crusader army destroyed, the road to Jerusalem is open, and Saladin is about to face his greatest test of character. September 20th, 1187. Saladin's army surrounds Jerusalem. Inside the walls, tens of thousands of Christian residents wait in terror. They know what the Crusaders did when they took this city 88 years ago. They expect the same fate. The city's military commander, Balian of Ibelin, is desperate. He rides out to negotiate with Saladin. He has no leverage, no army, no hope, but he tries anyway. Saladin's terms are simple: surrender, and everyone lives. Every Christian in the city will be allowed to ransom themselves. 10 dinars for a man, 5 for a woman, 1 for a child. Those who can pay will go free, those who can't will become slaves. Balian accepts. He has no choice. But then something remarkable happens. Saladin's own brother, Malik al-Adil, asks for 1,000 slaves as a gift. Saladin grants this. But instead of keeping them as slaves, Malik al-Adil sets them free. Inspired by this, Saladin releases hundreds more. Saladin's commanders follow suit. In the end, thousands who couldn't afford their ransom are freed anyway. But Saladin goes even further. He uses his own treasury to pay ransoms for those who still can't afford it. He orders safe passage for Christian refugees traveling to the coast. He protects Christian holy sites. He even allows Orthodox Christians to continue living in Jerusalem under Muslim rule. The Patriarch of Jerusalem, who oversees the city's Christians, leaves carrying cartloads of gold and treasure. Saladin's advisors are furious. They demand he seize the wealth. Saladin refuses. He gave his word, and his word is sacred. Compare this to what happened in 1099. When Crusaders took Jerusalem, they massacred everyone: Muslims, Jews, even Eastern Christians who didn't look European enough. The Al-Aqsa Mosque was turned into a stable. The Dome of the Rock was converted into a church. Blood and destruction everywhere. When Saladin takes Jerusalem, not a single person is killed. Not one building is burned. He cleanses the holy sites respectfully. He allows Jews to return to a city they'd been banned from for nearly a century. He establishes laws protecting pilgrims of all faiths. The contrast is so stark that even European Christians notice. Chronicles written by Crusaders themselves express shock and admiration. They can't understand how a Muslim leader could show more Christian virtue than Christian leaders themselves. But Saladin isn't doing this to impress his enemies. He's doing it because it aligns with his understanding of Islamic law and principles. The Quran commands believers to honor treaties, show mercy to non-combatants, and protect places of worship. Saladin takes these commands seriously, and this is what makes him legendary. Not just that he conquered Jerusalem, but how he conquered it. He proved that it's possible to be strong without being cruel, that victory doesn't require atrocity, that a leader can be both effective and ethical. News of Jerusalem's fall spreads across Europe like wildfire. It triggers the Third Crusade, the most famous of all the Crusades, led by three of Europe's most powerful kings. And it sets the stage for Saladin's greatest challenge yet, his confrontation with Richard the Lionheart. 1191. The Third Crusade is in full force. Leading it is King Richard I of England, known as Richard the Lionheart. He's everything you'd expect from a legendary warrior king. Tall, strong, fearless in battle, a tactical genius, and utterly ruthless when he needs to be. Richard has already retaken the coastal city of Acre after a brutal siege. When Muslim prisoners couldn't be ransomed quickly enough, Richard had nearly 3,000 of them executed in cold blood within sight of Saladin's army. It's a calculated act of terror meant to intimidate. Saladin is horrified but doesn't retaliate in kind. Instead, he prepares for the inevitable confrontation. Richard is marching south toward Jerusalem, and Saladin must stop him. What follows is a chess match between two of history's greatest military minds. Richard moves his army in tight formation along the coast, using his fleet for supplies, minimizing Saladin's advantages. Saladin uses hit-and-run tactics, trying to draw Richard into overextending. At Arsuf, they meet in open battle. Richard's disciplined knights break through Saladin's cavalry charges. It's one of Saladin's few clear defeats, but even in defeat, he withdraws in good order, preserving his army. The campaign becomes a stalemate. Richard can win battles, but he can't hold territory. His supply lines are stretched, his army is exhausted, and back in England, political enemies are plotting against him. He needs to return home. Saladin faces his own challenges. His army is tired. His treasury is depleted from years of war and generosity. His emirs are restless. Both leaders realize they need peace. But here's where the story becomes fascinating. Because despite being enemies, Richard and Saladin develop a mutual respect that becomes legendary. They never actually meet face to face, but they exchange gifts. Saladin sends Richard fruit and snow from the mountains when Richard falls ill. Richard sends Saladin falcons. They communicate through messengers, always with courtesy and honor. There's a famous story, possibly apocryphal but repeated throughout history. During one battle, Richard's horse is killed under him. Saladin, seeing this, orders 2 fresh horses to be sent to Richard. His commanders are baffled. Why would you help your enemy? Saladin's response becomes legendary. A king should not fight on foot. Whether this specific incident happened or not, it captures something real about their relationship. They fought hard against each other, but they fought with honor. And in doing so, they both elevated warfare from mere savagery to something approaching chivalry. In 1192, they negotiate a treaty. Richard doesn't get Jerusalem back, but Christians are guaranteed the right to make pilgrimages there safely. Crusader coastal territories remain Christian. Saladin keeps Jerusalem and the interior. Neither side gets everything they want, but both sides avoid catastrophic loss. When Richard leaves the Holy Land, he speaks of Saladin with genuine admiration. European chronicles record his words. Saladin is the greatest and most powerful leader in the Islamic world. He's also the most generous and merciful. This is extraordinary. Medieval kings rarely praise their enemies, but Richard recognizes something exceptional in Saladin, a leader who combines strength with honor, power with principle. And Saladin, for his part, respects Richard as well. He sees in Richard a mirror of himself, a warrior who lives by a code, who values honor, who understands that leadership is about more than just winning. Their rivalry becomes the stuff of legend. Troubadours sing songs about them. Chroniclers write epics. They become symbols of chivalry in both Christian and Muslim worlds. and their mutual respect transcends the brutal conflict they were part of. But Saladin's story is approaching its end, and what happens in his final days will cement his legacy forever. March 1193. Just months after the treaty with Richard, Saladin falls ill in Damascus. It starts with a fever. Within days, he's bedridden. Within 2 weeks, he's dying. As word spreads, people are shocked at what they discover. The Sultan, who ruled an empire stretching from Egypt to Syria, who commanded vast armies, who controlled trade routes and treasuries, has almost nothing in his personal possessions. His administrators check his accounts. They find 1 gold dinar and 40 silver dirhams, not enough to pay for his own funeral expenses. This isn't because Saladin was careless with money. It's because he gave it all away. Throughout his reign, he was famous for his generosity. Scholars who needed support, soldiers who needed pensions, cities that needed rebuilding, poor families who needed help. Saladin gave constantly, often impoverishing himself to help others. His son and close advisors are with him as he dies. There's a famous account, recorded by his biographer, Baha ad-Din, of Saladin's last days. A religious scholar sits by his bed, reciting the Quran. When the scholar reaches the verse, "There is no God but God, in him I trust," Saladin's face lights up with a smile. And then he's gone. He's only 55 years old, at the height of his power, and yet he dies almost penniless, having given everything to his people and his faith. His funeral procession through Damascus is unlike anything the city has seen. Thousands of people line the streets, rich and poor, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish, all mourning a leader who treated everyone with dignity. One contemporary chronicler writes that even Christians and Jews wept at his funeral, for he was a just ruler who showed mercy to all faiths. His body is buried in a simple tomb in Damascus. No grand monument, no towering mausoleum, just a modest tomb, befitting a man who valued substance over show. But here's what makes Saladin's death even more remarkable. Within years of his death, his empire fractures. His sons fight over inheritance. His carefully built unity dissolves. Everything he built politically falls apart. And yet his legacy grows stronger, because Saladin didn't just build an empire. He built an ideal, an example of what leadership could be. And that ideal survived long after his political achievements crumbled. Within a century, Christians in Europe are writing romances about him. Medieval poets portray him as the model of knightly virtue. Dante, in the Divine Comedy, places Saladin in limbo with the virtuous pagans, the highest honor a Christian writer of that era could give a non-Christian. Muslim scholars and leaders invoke his name as the standard of just rule. During the Ottoman period, sultans compare themselves to Saladin. In the modern era, leaders across the Middle East claim his legacy. His story transcends religion, nationality, and time, because at its core, Saladin's legacy isn't about Islam versus Christianity. It's about character versus chaos, honor versus hatred, principle versus power. He proved that you can be strong without being cruel, that you can win without losing your soul, that the greatest victory is earning your enemy's respect. So what can we learn from Saladin nearly 1,000 years later? What makes his story relevant in our world today? First, Saladin teaches us that true leadership isn't about domination. It's about inspiration. He didn't just conquer territories. He united people around a vision. And the key to that vision was something simple yet profound. Justice and mercy aren't weaknesses, they're strengths. In every decision, Saladin asked not just what would win the battle, but what would be right. When he took Jerusalem, he could have massacred its inhabitants. It would have been easier. It would have satisfied his own commander's thirst for revenge. But he chose differently, because he understood that history judges leaders not by their victories, but by their character. Second, Saladin shows us the power of respecting your enemies. In an age of total war, he maintained dignity and honor. He kept his word even when breaking it would have been advantageous. He treated prisoners humanely. He negotiated in good faith. And because of this, Even his enemies couldn't help but admire him. Imagine what our world would look like if modern leaders followed this principle. If they saw their opponents not as evil to be destroyed, but as adversaries to be respected. If they understood that the goal isn't to humiliate your enemy, but to find a path toward peace. Third, Saladin reminds us that legacy isn't measured in wealth or monuments. He died almost penniless. His empire collapsed within a generation, but his name is remembered with honor nearly a millennium later. Why? Because he lived his values. He didn't just talk about justice and mercy. He practiced them, even when it cost him. In our modern world of social media and instant fame, we often confuse visibility with significance. We think legacy is about how many followers you have, how much money you accumulate, how impressive your achievements look. Saladin's life tells a different story. True legacy is about the impact you have on others, the principles you uphold, the example you set. Fourth, Saladin demonstrates that cultural differences don't have to mean cultural warfare. He lived in a world torn by religious conflict. The Crusades weren't just political wars, they were holy wars, fought with the certainty that God was on your side and your enemy was evil incarnate. And yet Saladin transcended this. He protected Christian pilgrims. He engaged in respectful dialogue with Christian leaders. He understood that you can have deep faith without demonizing those who believe differently, that you can fight for your principles without losing your humanity. This lesson feels desperately relevant today. In our polarized world, where different groups see each other as threats, where every disagreement escalates into tribal warfare, Saladin offers a different model. Strength through principle, unity through respect, victory through honor. Finally, Saladin's story reminds us that one person can change the world. He wasn't born into power. He wasn't destined for greatness. He was the son of a provincial governor, a Kurd in a world ruled by Arabs and Turks, a young commander thrust into leadership before anyone thought he was ready. But he had something more important than birth or destiny. He had character, and he used that character to build something that outlasted empires. You don't need to be a sultan to live by Saladin's principles. You don't need to command armies to show mercy. You don't need to rule kingdoms to choose honor over convenience. Every day, in small ways, we face the same choices Saladin faced. Do we respond to hatred with more hatred, or do we rise above it? Do we seek revenge, or do we seek justice? Do we care only about winning, or do we care about how we win? These are the questions that define us, and Saladin's answer to these questions made him immortal. Saladin has been dead for over 800 years. His empire is dust. His battles are history. But his legacy lives on, not in monuments or wealth, in something far more powerful, in the idea that greatness is measured not by what you take, but by what you give, not by how many enemies you defeat, but by how much respect you earn. He was a Muslim leader, admired by Christians, a conqueror, remembered for mercy, a warrior celebrated for honor. He united a fractured world, not through fear, but through principle, and in doing so, he became immortal. This is the legacy worth inheriting, not conquest, not domination, but character, honor, justice, mercy. The medieval world is gone, but the choice Saladin faced is eternal. What kind of leader will you be? What kind of person will you become? How will you respond when you have power over others? These questions don't just apply to kings and sultans. They apply to all of us, in our relationships, our communities, our work. Every day, we choose what kind of legacy we're building. Saladin chose honor, and 8 centuries later, the world still remembers his name with respect. What will you choose? If this story moved you, inspired you, or taught you something valuable, subscribe to Learn Their Legacy, because history isn't just about the past. It's about the timeless principles that guide us toward becoming better versions of ourselves. Hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Saladin's story. And leave a comment telling me which legendary figure you want to learn about next. Because their legacy is our inheritance. And it's time we learned from it. Until next time, remember, greatness isn't about power. It's about character. And character is a choice you make every single day.